the incredible preciousness of silence and how we value silence, we recognize silence, and yet we can be so conditioned to be interpreting the moment, interpreting what is happening, instead of realizing the preciousness of what silence is actually offering us. And the great offering of silence is to know God. Silence is God. Silence is the glory. And in a way, in our lived experience, it's the doorway. It's the portal to the multidimensional wholeness of who we are and our lived experience, and the fullness and the glory. And in truth, silence is not an experience. Silence is our true nature. Silence is, we could stop there. Silence just is, right? And we know this. And yet the great invitation of silence is to remember that being present to our lived experience is where the grace is, and not so much in interpreting our lived experience, not trying to understand it, not trying to make sense of it, and definitely not trying to fix and change it, right? That in a way, the true sense comes, the making sense comes when we really are one with the intelligence of life. And it's through the silence that we come into the remembrance, the resonant remembrance with the intelligence of life. So in a way, just the stop and coming to the stillness, to the silence, is the way through everything. And yet we can be just so habituated to think about it, to try to work it out, try to understand. And of course, there's a protection and a learned sense of safety in understanding and having a semblance of control. And yet we really come to see that it's the release of control and the letting go into life, and that invitation to be so fully present with life as life, to be the intelligence of life, to be one with the intelligence of life. And we could say too, then, to be one with God, with the glory, and to discover what the glory actually is, beyond concept, beyond dogma, doctrine, ideas, and to actually open to the fullness and the wholeness, the richness of who and what we are. And that the silence of being, the silent being, the field of silent being, is the means that we all have access to all the time. That to come to the silence is to come to this moment, empty, undone. Or we could say, willing to be emptied, willing to be undone. With a willingness to know God and glory, a willingness to know love, a willingness to know a greater truth beyond our limited ideas of who and what we are. and that we're not cutting ourselves off from anything. We're actually opening to the fullness, to the wholeness. We're opening to receive ourselves with more kindness, more patience, more love. We're opening to receive all that we are and to stop fixing and changing, stop making ourselves wrong, stop collaborating with the idea that there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with life, or there's something wrong with the other, but to come to this collaboration with divine responsibility. And in the silence, in the stillness, we just stop. We stop making all the moves to get away from ourselves. We just stop making the moves to get away from the parts of ourself that are actually longing to be met in love, in care, right? We can tie ourselves in knots trying to make sense of life, trying to understand, trying to work it out, trying to find solutions. And yet somehow the only way that life makes sense is when we stop trying to control it, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand it. Because we let go into a flow of intelligence that does know. And when we let go into the flow of intelligence that does know, we're in a posture of surrender. We're in a posture of courage. And we're in a posture that is holding a deep sense of true faith. And a deep sense of true faith isn't a faith in anything external. It's a deep trust in myself, my own wholeness. It's a deep trust in the benevolence of life. It's a deep trust in love. To say, okay, as a me, as a mind, I can't work this out. But one with God, I know. One with the glory, one with my own wholeness, one with the intelligence of life. I enter a knowing of the heart that is undivided from the reality, undivided from the totality, and that somehow the intelligence of life is carrying me, that I may know this fullness, this wholeness, that I may remember the union in the heart and the unified field of one intelligence, one life. That I may know the wholeness of who and what I am, and join in this frequency of one substance, one essence, one principle, one field of illumination. That I can join in companionship as a unified field. And open to the wisdom of life. And I can open to an expansion beyond the learned sense of limitation and conditioning. That I can open to the wholeness of my self, of the one self. I can open to the discovery, the adventure of life. And I can let go of ideas of how it should be and receive the way that it is. And at the same time, open to the frequency field of love, which is the field of creation. open to the infinite field of possibility, where the intelligence of life can draw upon that infinite field in a more dynamic and fuller way. We could say the intelligence of life is always bringing the most potent possibility for us to adventure in. And sometimes that possibility will feel like it's calling us into frequencies of limitation. And we are being invited to meet the edges of our belief in limitation so that we can expand beyond a belief in limitation to know ourselves and to know life as the unlimited, boundless reality that it is. So even as these words are coming, just to feel and recognize this silence and this stillness, that is the frequency of the field of transmission, that the words are themselves silence, arising from silence and disappearing back into silence. That in a way, the invitation of the field is to discover yourself as the silent field of being, to let go of the holding and the protection, the sense of false safety, let go of the identities and the need to belong, and to find yourself as the fullness of life, in the wilds of love, the landscapes of consciousness that carry us beyond and deeper into the wild expanse of our true multidimensional being. That we're not opening up to kind of esoteric layers, we could say, that we're opening to the fullness of who we are. We're opening to the intelligence, the love that we are, the wisdom light that is shining. And to have access to this wisdom light is to have access to a light that can illuminate the fullness of what life is offering. It gives us access to the deep knowing of the heart. And the deep knowing of the heart brings us to an autonomy. We could say a sovereignty. The opening to wholeness and curiously letting go of control opens us to a sovereignty and a freedom and a sense of wholeness that we are longing for, but that we cannot discover through controlling and trying and efforting. That the fullness that we are longing for in life, the grace that we are wanting to manifest and invite in life, the joy and the happiness, the delight, the awe, the wonder, the adventure, the love, the unconditional dance of life that we are longing for is all here in the intelligence. And it's coming into true collaboration with the intelligence of life. In a way, we could say that is to enter a flow of pure devotion. To come into connection with the intelligence of life, we enter a flow of life devoted to life, of love flowing in devotion to itself. That the integrity of wholeness is a flow of intelligence that is so integral in its devotion to itself that it never ever looks away. Its gaze never ever wanders. And a gaze that never wanders is wholeness, right? So in the stillness, in the silence, we're being invited to find a gaze upon the fullness of ourself that never wanders, that never doubts, that doesn't stray away, that doesn't make me wrong, doesn't make life wrong, that somehow knows that it can count upon itself and its depthful, integral belonging to itself, that doesn't stray to try to belong here, doesn't get pulled into, we could say, like the tribal consciousness, in the ways that we learned that belonging was outside of us, that we discover that what we're longing for is to belong to our very own self. We're longing to belong to wholeness. And yes, we could say longing to belong to God, belong to the divine. But what we're really speaking of is not something that is apart from us. We're speaking of knowing ourselves as one with the divine, as one with what God truly is. And there's no elevation or inflation of a me in this. It's an entering of a field of total humility. And the grace and the glory of this is that this is not something that we can enter with the ego intact, right? You can't buy your way in. You cannot manipulate your way in. And this is one of the things that's so frustrating for the ego sense, for the sense of me, is that we cannot come to God and glory, to true freedom, or even the wholeness of what we are in any other posture but utter humility, in pure devotion. We cannot come in any other posture. And that posture is not a posturing to anything external. It's a humility that asks us to bow to the fullness of ourself in kindness, in patience, in care, in compassion, that recognizes that every single fiber of our being that is entangled away from the fullness of acceptance and receptivity and inclusivity in our lived experience is going to bring a felt sense of fragmentation, of being divided, of being limited. That our wholeness depends upon us truly fully embracing the wholeness of who we are, and all of the seeming pieces and parts and fragments that we have divided from. And this isn't a project in time. It's a moment of openness. It's a moment. And we could say in the play of time, it might seem like a process in time. It may seem like we're moving through time and space and that we're evolving in time and space. And that's the play of life. The experience of time and space feels very real. And it's an adventure. And why not, right? But the truth is that the knowing of our wholeness is here now. So in a way, we're entering into an expression that could feel a little mind-boggling, and that's its own grace, because where the mind can't go, and what the mind can't quite understand, it starts to create like an energetic vortex of deep true knowing in consciousness, where there's a sense of getting it, understanding, and yet the mind cannot track. And what we're speaking of is entering into the knowing of the heart. Because here now, you are already whole, we are already whole. There's nothing to fix and change. The grace and glory of God is intact and has always been so. The light is on, it's beaming, it's bright, it's radiant, it's brilliant. And we already are that. And we have that knowing in our lived capacity. We have access to that knowing. We already know this. It's what creates a sense of seeking for freedom, for wholeness, is that we already know this. We're already touching it. And yet we've learned not to trust that intuitive knowing. We've learned to live in realms of false safety and belonging. We've learned to live as a person that's divided from the whole, and to try to play the game of life, try to find some kind of success or winning in the game of life. And yet simultaneously, in the here now, in the timeless being, the field of timeless being, we're already whole. It's already done. And in a way, our lived experience is creating like an inner collaboration that integrates the lived experience of life and the misunderstandings with the deep knowing of who we are, that in a way frees us from the adventure of being a soul that is like an individual soul. That the soul is a window, really, to our fullness, to our wholeness. And that just to know the soul is not the fullness. To shine the soul light is to open the window and to let the radiance of the glory come shining in, that brings us to the knowing that we are one with the all that is. And then we're not actually looking for a personal achievement. We're not looking for a personal awakening. We're not looking for a personal spiritual opening. That we're actually being invited to discover how we belong to the One, and to let go of all of the safety-seeking, protective habits and our conditioned, learned way of wanting to belong to the tribe, to the collective, and to have the willingness and the courage to belong to the One, and to enter the universal cosmic field of our multidimensional universal being, where we are one in love, where we are one in heart, where we are one in God, one field of silent presence, where the flow of life is an intelligence that is pure abundance, where giving and receiving are the same, where there is caring and sharing as a natural flow of life. And to us in our human lived experience, this may seem like a utopian idea that we are all in our own ways chasing. longing for. But it's not something that we can achieve in separation, in division, in limitation. We can only, let's say, achieve this vision when we enter the here now, and we enter the timeless field and the reality. It's like we enter a frequency field of love where it already is. And then our lived human experience, we realize, is this kind of integration of then, okay, so I can open to this as a transcendent field. I can open to the sense of freedom and wholeness, the beauty. And yet, how do I bring this to the surface of life? Or how do I live this? And in a way, that's our living inquiry. This is the adventure that we are taking part in together, is how do we live this reality? What is it to live this reality, to open to and to live it? And what we discover is that in order to integrate opening to the reality and the frequency of love and unity and fullness and like a knowing of the presence of God, we then open to then how do we live this, and what truly is it to touch the divine and to enter the frequency of what is divine and pure and real and whole, to know this as the truth of who we are, and then to bring this fullness into our lived experience. And of course, the living of life is the way, that life itself is the way. And in every moment, we are given this opportunity to bridge in our lived experience where we can have the courage to collapse the patterns of conditioning, limitation, belonging, safety. And we can actually, in a way, be a broadcasting transmitter of the frequency of true love, of true belonging. Like that our frequency is saying, I belong to love, I belong to God. I'm not interested in joining your tribe and playing your games. I'm interested in being this frequency field of love, of God, of glory. And I'm going to be the light that illuminates in my lived experience where I'm holding patterns of safety and conditioning. I'm going to have the courage to transmute and unravel. And I don't know what that looks like. And we also realize that sometimes it can bring challenge, it can bring intensity, but there's a willingness in our hearts to live this and to let our life be like a living bridge for the evolution of consciousness. And we could say that our life is a living bridge of the evolution of the consciousness of humanity, that it's not a personal sense of making it better for me, more for me, all about me. It's about entering into this collaborative field of pure devotion, where the frequency of caring, sharing, giving, receiving, loving is a true emanation of being in the embrace, in the lap of God and glory, right? That our lived experience is an emanation, as a transmission field of living in this knowing. And of course, we speak of it already is, and there's a way that we know this, and yet we would also say we're still deepening into that knowing, being very rooted. So this whole lived experience is such a wild adventure, right? And whatever these words are touching in you, wherever you are being touched, stirred, enlivened, ignited, triggered even, right? whatever is happening, then each of us is uniquely touching our edge or our knowing, being enlivened, deepening the recognition, the cognizing as intelligence, what is known. And in a way, this is happening in a field of silence, of stillness. It's happening in a field of being. Even though there are words coming, there's no knowledge being learned here. There's no teaching being imparted here. There's no notes that need to be taken, because they won't mean anything, right? They won't mean anything unless it roots and enlivens in the field of intelligence, because this is where the integration and the change happens. Now, of course, if we take a little note of something that inspires or sparks something, we can look back at it and it will spark that again. But it's not about holding the information as something the mind can make sense of. And yet at the same time, the grace is that as the intelligence is enlivened and the knowing of the heart and this unified remembrance gets enlivened and ignited, activated in the field, then the mind too is part of that, right? The mind is not left out. The mind is being, we could say, deconditioned and enlivened and activated as a true flow of consciousness, right? As a cosmic mind, joining the one flow of intelligence, that my mind joins, we could say, the mind of God. My mind stops swirling in ideas of division and limitation, and the mind itself surrenders itself to what it is longing for, right? There's no part of us that's left out of this revelation of wholeness, revelation of the one heart. There's no fiber, thread, atom, or any single fragment that's left out of this wholeness. And yet we are each having a completely unique adventure. And the more that we come into collaboration, this flow of pure devotion, where in a way our devotion is to our own self, is to our own wholeness. We could say our devotion is to the divine, to God, to the glory, but it's to understanding how we are one with that. To be in devotion to God, to the glory, even to be in devotion to some sense of deity that represents or ignites that in us, is all just leading us to know the wholeness of ourself, right? The Father and I are one. The Mother and I are one, right? This is not about a personal ascension. This is not about me achieving something or me finding that I'm actually hierarchically more glorious than you, right? This is about us all collapsing our sense of safety and protection and the identities that we hold to discover that whilst we are unique, glorious flowers in God's garden, we are one in essence, we are one in principle, we are one in love. And what is it to live this? Sounds like fun, sounds beautiful, right? Just to notice what happens in your heart, what happens in your mind, what happens in your body, what happens in your cells, what happens in your consciousness, what happens to the field of your lived experience. And to know that each one of us is a unique flow of intelligence, and that really we're being invited to live the fullness of our uniqueness. That in a way, we might think that we're collapsing all that I am and all that I've learned and all of, my legacy as a me, like I don't want to let that go and just merge into like a cauldron, of like mud, when you're painting, you have your pure colors and you mix your colors according to like, the color wheel gives you information of how to not make mud. Right? So we might have a sense of like, I don't want to just become mud. I don't want to just merge into just being one color with everyone. But the beauty is that what we're merging into is pure light. We're merging into the pure, clear light. And as we merge into being one in the light, we actually start shining in the radiance of pure color, in the uniqueness of the flower that we are here to be. We start to shine with a radiance and a truth that we've never shined with before. We've been looking for it. We've been trying to. But we can't actually activate the fullness of our dharmic flow. Only out of the fertile ground of unity can we actually activate the full dharmic flow and truly blossom. And so far from losing ourselves, we find ourselves. We find the grace and the glory of who we are, and that everything that we have been longing for is here. And yet, yes, it's an adventure to reorganize the conditionings. It's an adventure of life, and life is the way to see through the ways that we protect and try to keep ourselves safe. And yet the outstretched hand of life is offering us in every moment an opportunity to step just onto the bridge and be like a living, integrative being that is using the dance of life to know more of the wholeness of who we are, and to play together, to share together in this adventure. To surrender the safety mechanisms that independence and self-reliance can be. That there's no doubt, no question that there's an autonomy, but the autonomy isn't a protective independence. The autonomy is that we each have our own autonomous connection to Source, to God, to glory. And as we connect, we realize that that doesn't keep us apart, that actually that is what joins us. It's like we're all plugging in to the same source. And as we plug into the same source, we realize our belonging, and there's no more need for competition and comparison, because there's enough for everyone. There's enough love. There's enough resources. There's enough of everything for everyone. And so we open to a field that is a field of blessing, a field of blessings. And we realize that when we enter a field of blessing, we can just use the mechanism of blessing, which is really the mechanism of bringing love to touch everything. So everything that feels kind of stressful or discordant or discombobulated in our field, we can bless it, we can touch it with the presence of love and allow a reorganization of our field. We can bless ourselves, we can bless our companions, we can bless the ones that bug us, we can bless the ones that that we feel discordance with, that we might have outstanding conflict with, we can bless it all. And in blessing it all, we let the heart of love, where we are connected to the source of love, touch everything and bring a quality of inclusivity, where in a way the light is illuminating the essence of everything as being the same. So just resting here and receiving, feeling the silence, the stillness, the transmission field of what the heart knows, feeling the enlivening and the connection to source, to the recognition of a sense of what is true, of what the heart already knows, of being one with the field of intelligence. And to just be present with what is here, what the field of your experience is bringing, and not needing to understand it, not needing to interpret it, not taking ownership of it, but just allowing the fullness to be a frequency that deepens, a consciousness that illuminates, to be a frequency that heals in the truest, deepest sense, that reorganizes and repatterns the field multidimensionally to bring the attunement of the frequency of God and glory of love to every single cell fiber atom of our being. We are bathing in light, bathing in love. We are suspended in a field of light, of love that is just inviting us to see, to feel, to open to the silent presence of being. To discover